Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSVs. I say another, this is my fourth today. I've got one yet to come out after the two I've just released. After speaking to Germany to Ukraine, I will need to go and have just a little bit of a lie down. I can't afford to do that today, I've got too much to do. So thank you for Germany to Ukraine for coming to talk to us again. I think this is the third time he has spoken to us. He is from the Turchny group of people who are interested in reporting the news accurately from Ukraine and analyzing data accurately, because that's super, super important. It's aligned with my own beliefs. And he is a bit of a self-taught. He's not an official from like the Bundestag or something like that, but a kind of a self-taught expert on aid from Germany to Ukraine, and he's such a useful source. I implore all of you to follow him on Twitter. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Yeah, I'm glad to be back. Yeah, like you said, third time. So
it's a dream. It's a dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we go to, I'm just going to bring up your what am I talking about? Your Twitter handle. I just can't find it. There it is. Just to point people towards where they can find you. So let's now do that. So this is his Twitter handle, German Aid to Ukraine, or at @DeaIdua. And DeaIdua is the name of his website, deaidua.org /EN for the English version. This lists all of the deliveries from Germany to Ukraine. It's a fantastic website, but you do have an omission of the last few deliveries. Is that right?
Yeah, so the last update I made was in late January, and since then there were two updates. I didn't update the website the last two times, just based on the fact that I'm working on a new version with it, much more functionality, new design, completely with a right backend. It's a lot of programming work, and I just don't want to not waste, but I want to invest my time more better. So I didn't update the website.
Yeah, and this is a great website as it stands. I mean, it's just fantastic. So it's missing the last few deliveries, and then there is a news version. So deaidua.org /news, and that gives in English a kind of blog entries or news article entries on the different packages and elements to do with each package. Is there any particular article that you want to point people towards at the moment?
At the moment, yeah, probably the one you're pointing already, the 1.13 billion euro aid package. It's a very, very, very detailed package. I have the feeling that during our podcast we will talk about the package. But if you want to have a even more detailed version of it, you can just take a look at this article. It explains everything in detail.
Well, actually, that's probably a good place to start. Is that aid package? So this is the latest one that has been given to Ukraine, or at least pledged. And obviously, there's often a difference between pledged and delivered, and also in terms of pledged, the time frames concerned. So I think with this package, if I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is a fairly, looking quite a lot into the distance of delivery schedules.
Partly, yeah, partly. I think it addresses both Ukraine's short-term and long-term needs because of ammunition, artillery, and air defense. The package contains 18 Panzerhaubitze 2000, 18 remote control Howitzers 155, 2 Skynex air defense systems, 120,000 shells of 122 artillery ammunition, and 100 IRIS-T missiles for the IRIS-T SLS launchers. Since we are talking about newly produced artillery systems, we are of course talking about a larger delivery time schedule, which means the deliveries are starting in 2025 and will be going until 2027. Both Skynex air defense systems will be delivered in 2025, but very good news is that the ammunition will get delivered in total within 2024, so this year. I personally expect the artillery ammunition actually very, very fast in Ukraine. And you actually know why, Jonathan. Did you talk about the statement of the president during the Munich Security Conference?
Remind me.
He said that the Czech Republic has located 800,000 artillery sheds
Yes.
somewhere abroad. Yeah. And I mean, this 800,000 sheds are consisting of 300,000 1 to 2 millimeter sheds and 500,000 1.5 millimeter sheds. He also said that these sheds could be delivered within a few weeks after financing has been done, right? And that they are talking with many countries, also with Germany, about the financing. And he's said that just one day after we have announced the delivery of 100,000 of these, 120,000 of these sheds.
Wow. Okay.
What a
So
coincidence, right?
yeah.
I
So
mean,
this could be part of that. And that would be
yeah.
super significant. Can you just give us a bit of detail about difference between 122 mil and 155 mil shells?
Yeah, so 155 is the basic NATO standard, right? And the 122 is the old Soviet standard. It's a
Right.
very brief explanation.
Yep, and so that's particularly useful for all the Soviet era artillery that they are using, the Ukrainians are using. So, wow, because there was a lot of talk about where that's going to come from. You had the EU has long been talking about aid packages centrally from themselves, and they have given many packages, and they've pledged 1 million shells by the end of March. That's not going to happen, but it could happen if they were able to go outside of the EU. But there are certain EU members that want the money to stay within the EU. You can understand that for economic reasons. Right, we've got all this money that we're generating from our taxpayers. We'd like to spend that within the EU so that that money multiplies within the EU and is a benefit to the EU. And if you go and spend that money on artillery production, ammunition production outside the EU, then the taxpayers don't get the benefit of that. And so we've had France saying no to procuring ammunition from outside the EU. But then recently we had Greece and Cyprus doing the same. And I was wondering, oh, well, that's a bit weird. Do they have ammunition production in their countries? But it's more to do with Turkey being a provider. So I think Turkey is an important country for providing artillery ammunition as far as that Czechia pledge was concerned. Is that how you would interpret it?
Yeah, and I actually find that very weird, right? I mean, the relationship between Greece and Turkey is, yeah, not easy. Let's phrase it that way. But I, as Greece, would be happy if Turkey would spend like hundreds of thousands of their artillery shells on other armies, right? I mean, so they can't use it themselves. That's the point I don't understand, really.
There is this idea. I mean, this is what the Danish have talked about recently, which is, what's the point of having all this stuff that was designed to be used against Soviet enemies? What's the point of having all this and then keeping it in, for example, Denmark, when the Ukrainians are fighting right now against the Soviet Union in its latest iteration? And you know, they need this stuff desperately. So Denmark have got the right idea in my book, which is, yeah, give everything we can. I mean, everything we can to Ukraine. This was a question I wanted to come to later, and I guess now's probably a good time before we kind of get into the details of this package. But with Germany, is there a worry that they would have no stocks left themselves? Is the German Bundeswehr, the German army, lacking in stocks so that they are unable to give too much more stuff to Ukraine?
I mean, from my personal view, it was also the case during the start of the full-scale invasion. We already had a completely underfunded Bundeswehr, which was the reason for that 100 billion special fund, which even isn't enough to fund the Bundeswehr. I mean, they're saying they need that at least 2 times more. So they don't need 100 billion, they need 300 billion euros
really
to actually bring the Bundeswehr to a normal level, right? And since then, we have delivered a lot of stuff from Bundeswehr stocks. I mean, we delivered Leopard, we delivered Marders, we delivered Dingoes, a large number of hand grenades, machine guns, spare parts, missiles, manpads, artillery. Everything came from Bundeswehr stocks, right? And especially the Patriots, I would say, are particularly noticeable. We have delivered 2 of our 13 systems to Ukraine, together with 220 guided missiles and 2 additional launchers, also for Patriot. And one of the remaining systems in service of the Bundeswehr is just a training system. So efficiently, we only have more or less 10 systems, sorry. And that may sound a lot to some people. But when you consider, for example, last year, we had 3 systems in Poland to protect Poland from Russian drones and cruise missiles. We had 2 systems in Slovakia. We also had Patriot stationed in Lithuania during the NATO summit. And some of our own systems are in the industry for upgrades. And then you can imagine how many Patriot systems Germany has for their own country, for the defense. Basically, nearly nothing.
That's really interesting. It's this kind of detail that I absolutely love getting from you. So the Bundeswehr themselves are very much like the British Army, kind of underfunded over a long period of time, desperately needing stocks in a cupboard, but not with a lot to draw on. But instead, I guess aid packages are now going to rely almost entirely on the construction or the manufacture of the goods. Is that right? I mean, I presume most of what you're going to give now is going to be stuff that you build.
Yeah, I would say 9 out of 10, maybe even more, is coming from the industry right now.
Yeah. And does Germany ever go? Because the British have, it was quite quick that we ran out of stuff, generally speaking. And we started going abroad to buy things, use our money to buy things rather than build things. Have Germany done that at all?
Buying from outside of Germany, or
yeah.
I mean, not to that extent. I would hope for. We are still missing out on a lot of opportunities to buy from other countries. But we have done this. Yeah, we are buying and delivering drones, for example, from Denmark and from the Czech Republic.
And
Jesus, now I have to think.
The
Gepards. Thank you very much. We have bought the Gepards together with the US, for example, from Jordan. We have also bought our own Gepards back from Qatar. That we're buying from some certain countries, but not to that extent that I would hope for, to be honest.
Yeah, and going back to the aid package then. So there's 2 Skynex air defense systems that you say will be ready in 2025. Is that right?
Yes.
So I find this quite interesting because you think of these big bits of kit and you think, right, you know, if you're going to deliver, so if I'm making like the Apple Vision, right, and this is like, you know, some expensive bit of kit that I want everyone to buy, then I need to have production schedules that can really take off if lots of people buy these. And you think, yeah, these are niche pieces, these are niche weapon systems, but it seems quite frustrating that it takes so long to get these orders in and get the production up to like usable levels that you know, you wonder, like, surely you want to sell this stuff to the whole world and sell as much in as possible, but it just takes so long to build and they don't seem to be able to. I mean, this is the same for everyone. This is nothing, like, not criticism of Germany. It just takes so long to build these things.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think it comes down to the fact that these are completely new systems. Like, it's not that they were invented and that they are in service with 10 different countries. So there's a big production line and stuff like this, right? I believe only one country, was it Qatar? I think it was Qatar. Only one country has this system in service, you know, and so there's not a very big production line for Rheinmetall, and it just takes a lot of time to produce these. When there would be a big production line and a lot of countries would already have them in service, then I think everything would be fine, and we would spare a couple of months. But yeah, not like this. And this also goes for the remote controlled howitzers, for example, the RCH 155.
I didn't realize that's what they stand for, remote controlled. So
remote controlled howitzers.
Can they be used unmanned?
Later. Right now, not. But the plan is, when I have that right in my head, the plan is to actually have a fully armored remote controlled howitzers on a later stage. So you basically just sit in your bunker or whatever you're sitting, right? And you basically just control it like a drone.
Yeah. That's incredible. So, I mean, I always thought that these were tiny little things, but actually, someone's telling me they're only like 60 centimeters shorter or something than some other howitzers. So, although they look quite small, maybe I'm a bit wrong in that. But yeah, just incredible things. These, but there is a delay on these as well, right? So when are the RCH getting there?
The first batch, I mean, this is only the second batch which got announced, right? We already have announced a first batch in December 2022, and the training is about to start in Q4 this year, and the delivery is also at least scheduled to take place in Q4 this year. And then 18 systems are coming, and then meanwhile the production for the second batch is going on, and then the second batch is getting delivered. So it's basically starting this year in, let's say, November, December, and then it's rolling off until 2026.
Do you know what? Sometimes I am impressed quite a lot by Wikipedia. I mean, Wikipedia has actually just nailed what you just said there, quite accurately in just the what with regard to Ukrainian provision of RCH 155. So good for those volunteers getting behind accurate information dispersal there. So it's good stuff. Okay, let's go back to what we have here. So those RCHs, which are going to be super useful bits of kit for the Ukrainians, and obviously the Panzerherz 2000s. What's the date for delivery of them?
When I remember right, they are also starting in 2025 and then going over 3 years until 2027.
So yeah, that's a long-term thing, really. It's not going to help this year. There's the shells you think might be imminent, and the Iris-T missiles, are they short range or long range? I thought these were the short range ones. Was it?
Yes, so the Iris-T missiles are the basic air-to-air missiles, which also gets used with the fighter jets. They are just getting a software update, and then they could be used as a ground launch version for the SLS launchers we have delivered to Ukraine. And it's basically a less powerful version and a much cheaper version. So it's basic use against drones and stuff like this, right?
Right. Okay. And is that fairly quick delivery of them? That's not one of these that's looking into 2025.
No, they're getting delivered this year.
Right. Yeah. So that's good news. Anything else you can say about that package that is relevant?
Which relevant? Not, but we have talked about everything, to be honest.
Okay. So going forward, then, what do you think Germany is going to be looking at doing with like future aid packages? So given that as we said, that most of their stocks are probably exhausted to some degree, where are Germany going to be placing themselves in terms of, because everyone has their expertise, these coalitions where you say, right, the UK is involved in the maritime coalition, and you got Latvia and all these countries, including the UK, in like the drone coalition. Germany be part of those coalitions. What are Germany looking at helping with going forward?
I mean, to be honest, I would expect that the new package isn't going, or that a new package isn't going to be announced like in May or June, something. I mean, we have just announced 2 packages, right? And both in this month. A lot of people forget that this isn't the only package we have announced this month. We have just days before we announced this 1.13 billion package. We actually have announced a 100 million euro aid package, which is for the needs right now, right? We have a lot of logistical vehicles, MREPs, actually bombs for small drones, medical supplies, spare parts, right? So I think the next package might take a while, or at least a couple of months. And I think what we can look at is the air defense systems, missiles, artillery ammunition always comes handy, right? And I think we could also look at UAVs, because a lot of the drones we have announced for this year, or we have announced already, let's put it that way, are going to be delivered this year. So we have to pledge new drones if we want to deliver them in the future. And apart from that, I'm hoping that we are buying Patriot missiles from the US, because there's literally no other source I can think of, at least where we could buy from. In terms of short-term aid, right? I mean, it doesn't give us any good if we think about, okay, yeah, we are buying, let's say, 500 missiles from this manufacturer, right? And we're delivering this to Ukraine in 2028. That's not helping Ukraine, right? We need to find sources for aid which can be delivered right now, and I just see either that other European / NATO members are delivering missiles of their own, which they haven't done already, or we're buying in the US from US stocks. That's the only option I see.
And talking about artillery ammunition, because that is the screaming need of Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah.
How's it looking with German provision of that or production of that? I know there's lots going on, and it's hard to keep a handle on, who's producing what and where they're getting stuff from. But it is German production is obviously ramping up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the like just as you said, the industry is constantly expanding its capacities and building new factory. When we just talk about Rheinmetall, Rheinmetall very publicly and probably the biggest European providers, they have expanded all their factories. As far as I know, they bought in Spain Expa Systems for 1.2 billion euros. They are currently building a new 155 millimeter factory, a new factory for explosives, and also one for rocket motors for 300 million euros in Unterlüß in Germany. They're also building a new 155 factory in Hungary, and a memorandum of understanding was just signed with the UDI, so with the Ukrainian defense industry, with the intention to build also a new 155 millimeter factory in Ukraine. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
And did you mention Lithuania there as well?
Yeah, there's also the plan. Yeah, exactly. I forgot about Lithuania. Yeah, but Lithuania also, yeah.
Yeah, like it just seems like everywhere. So, and is that all Rheinmetall?
Yeah, that's all Rheinmetall. And
Wow.
the big problem for this is, of course, I mean, this is good for like in 1, 2, 3 years, right? But it feels like in terms of help right now or assistance right now, there's not a lot of stuff which you could do other than buy from sources abroad.
Yeah. And really, when you look at what the US have done in terms of moving from 14,000 shells a month to over 30,000 shells a month now, the US are really one of the, as well as the stocks they have of cluster munitions and shells as it is. I mean, they've got vast stocks of this stuff. The US really are the central component in aid to Ukraine. It's particularly with the needs now. It comes back to this problem of the impasse in Congress that is really resulting in the deaths of many Ukrainians, unfortunately. And it's Germany and Europe. My opinion, and I don't know if you agree with me, is that you can't change where Europe were at before this war in terms of underfunding, lack of production capabilities or capacities, etc., etc., etc. Right. So, but since the war's begun, and particularly in the last 6 months to a year, I think Europe is doing a pretty good job of ramping up production and scaling things that are needed for Ukraine. Is that fair? Do you think, or do you think there's not enough urgency?
No, I think you actually summarized it very well. We have gone a long way. It just feels that we are missing out on opportunities. I mean, we're really doing well, not just Germany, but also other countries. Of course, there are other countries that are doing not so well. Don't want to mention anyone here. Of course, there's also stuff which Germany doesn't do right, where we are just, I don't know what we are doing, to be honest. But I think for the majority, we're doing good.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it's like turning a tanker. So in order to ramp that up and to get from where we were to where we want to be, that takes several years, as you say, and it's just such a frustration because they need things right now, which is where, again, it goes back to the US is the main entity that is able to do. I think no one else is particularly able to do that. There are maybe some reserves of shells, so Turkey might be able to help. Other places. Someone was asking about Australia. So Australia, I do believe, has the ability. They've got some production that has been ramped up. I believe. I don't know whether it's BAE Systems or someone else in Australia, but I do believe that they are helping in some way. I don't know the details of that though. Does anyone know of new factories in Australia are producing for Ukraine or anyone? The idea of like a global marketplace is that even if you aren't producing directly for Ukraine, you're feeding into the supply and the market, which means that other people can then supply directly to Ukraine, or so on and so forth. Even if it's not directly to Ukraine, it helps Ukraine get stuff. Is my interpretation.
Yeah, no, absolutely right.
So Germany is ramping up in terms of artillery production to help Ukraine. That is something that you're happy to say Germany are doing what they can.
Yeah, at least when we're comparing this with other countries, major production countries of artillery ammunition, I think we're doing very well. I think that there are shortages or there are problems where they don't want to speak about. But we're doing good, yeah.
Good. So I was going to just talk briefly about this. I don't even know much about this, but I mentioned this in my most recent video, which I haven't released yet. But as German defense companies continue to actively cooperate with Ukraine, Dynamit Nobel Defense plans to produce Panzerfaust 3 grenade launchers in Ukraine, at least in the initial stage. MBDA, so MBDA Deutschland is part of the MBDA, so France, Italy, UK, who make Storm Shadows and Taurus as well. Anyway, they're beginning to cooperation with Ukroboronprom in the field of air defense, in particular countering drones. Obviously, it's not just Rheinmetall. There are other German entities who are helping Ukraine and getting involved in working cooperatively with them.
Yeah, I mean, basically, all these memorandum of understanding, sorry, were all signed, when I remember correctly, during the Munich Security Conference, right? I believe it was like 3 companies in total. They actually spoke with 17, I believe.
Yes, I was just about to say that there was 7, like Commission, I think it was, spoke with 17 German defense interests. Like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of which are already working in Ukraine. I mean, Rheinmetall, for example, is already working still. They have signed a new one with the 155 plant. Quantum Systems, for example, which are delivering the vector drones to Ukraine, they have already a training center and a repair shop and everything in Ukraine. So there are some German companies which are already operating in Ukraine. Dynamit is producing the Panzerfaust 3 and the Matador, for example. And just as you said, they are planning to produce it locally in Ukraine. And MBDA Deutschland, I was actually surprised to see them on the list. But yeah, we'll have to see what they're actually doing.
Can you remind us of what vector drones, because these get mentioned an awful lot in aid packages, and Germany has given these. So I guess if we go back to your website here, somewhere here, so you've got vector drones, 162 so far. Could be more, I don't know, in the last 2 packages, but
should be more.
Yeah, what are these? Pretty decent drones?
Oh yeah, like one drone, just to give you a number, one drone costs about 180,000 euros. So
quite expensive.
Yeah, quite an expensive drone. They are very, very capable.
And 162 of them is obviously pretty useful. Just going back to, you mentioned the dingoes, and Germany has given a number of dingoes. Let's just see how many. Control F, dingo.
50.
There you go. Yeah, 50. Oh, there you go. You knew it. You didn't need me to find it. So 50 dingoes. I've not seen these being used in Ukraine at all, actually. I've not seen any being blown up, which I suppose is good news. Do you know of any usage of them?
Yeah. They're getting, I mean, 50 vehicles is not a lot, so you
Yeah, it's
don't
true.
see a lot of footage. I mean, it's a lot for us since everything came from Bundeswehr stocks. But like it could be way more, right? And they were used in Bakhmut, for example, during the defense.
Right.
We have seen footage. So I would say I've seen like 3, 4 videos and about 10 images or something like this, from systems working. And they have destroyed or abandoned, I would say, 5 or 6 vehicles, maybe
Right.
7 of these. So there were already losses of them.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, that's good. Good that they are indeed being used. I mean, Germany seems to do a really good job. If we go back to this on the previous package of providing an awful lot of trucks. Indeed, if we go down, I don't know where it is going to be on here. That's
Logistical
no,
ones, loss. Yeah, down. Yeah, there.
yeah, here. So, there's a lot of these trucks that have been given, and these are not unsubstantial trucks. 90 HX81s, 34 load handling trucks of 15 tons. There are hundreds of these, really, the Zetros trucks and semi-trailers and whatnot. Are they, I mean, are they all coming from military stocks, or are these being built? Do you know? I mean, this is a pretty good delivery.
Yeah, so partly the deliveries are, of course, coming from the Bundeswehr. But the majority of these systems, like for example the Zetros, when I remember correctly, they're not in service with the Bundeswehr, so everything came from the industry. It was newly produced for Ukraine. Same goes for the HX81, the tank transporters, for example, which you actually see a lot of times in Ukraine. You actually see a lot of footage of them. They all got newly produced for Ukraine.
Brilliant. And I just want to, I mean, this is probably poor show, but a bit of Meryl Streep film reference here. Not everyone will get this. A dingo took my baby. If a dingo did take your baby, if it was in that, it would be a lot safer than the Australian dingo. But anyway, that's just a random aside for anyone that's seen that film. Right. So moving swiftly on, I wanted to know, because Germany seems to have become it's positioned itself in Europe as being a major military, I don't know if power is the right word, major military player in terms of European militaries, and certainly in terms of supporting Ukraine, politically speaking. A couple of things I want to talk about is, one, Olaf Scholz, and two, people living around these places where these factories are being built or working, overtime and whatnot. So we'll start with Olaf Scholz, if I may. How is this positioning of the Bundeswehr and Germany in general with regard to supporting Ukraine playing with the German public, from your point of view? I know it'll be anecdotal.
First, you can ask me anything. If I respond to that, is a different question. Yeah, I think that's that's actually a hard question.
Because he's not super popular, Olaf Scholz, is
Yeah.
he? Like, as leader of the coalition within the SDP, he's got pretty low ratings. But I wonder whether this is good for his ratings, or whether it doesn't affect it. Whether people are like, "Oh yeah, thanks, Olaf Scholz," and the fact that he's actually being prominent in European politics, does that do people see that in Germany?
Yeah, so my personal opinion is that although Ukraine is a major topic because it triggers many problems, and not saying that in a bad way or with bad intention, Ukraine is not at fault of this. Of course, just Russia is at fault of this, but the war in Ukraine triggers these problems. And the direct military support, I would say, is only part of the problem in domestic policy for Olaf Scholz. And that's just my personal opinion. I mean, if you probably ask 3 other Germans, they all have other opinions on this. But let's ask you a question. Like, how much do you think that the recent 2 years of war in Ukraine have cost Germany so far in economic damage? And everyone watching this can take a quick guess. Like, how much would you guess? economic damage?
I wouldn't know where to start, but I assume it's pretty significant because you've had to pay for refugees coming into Germany in huge numbers. That's going to affect your education. That's going to affect your welfare, your housing. So those are huge costs that I don't think are as represented in statistics like the Kiel Institute and whatnot. Although they do have elements of that. I wouldn't know what number to put on it, but quite a lot.
Yeah, so according to the German Institute for Economic Research, that's why I also know this, because it was just published today. So it's very, very
Wow.
recent
Okay.
numbers. The last 2 years of war in Ukraine have cost Germany, just in economic damage, that's not what we have given in aid and stuff, all these billions, it's just the
Right.
economic damage, around 200 billion euros. And I don't think that something like this can pass a government without leaving traces, and apart from that, in my opinion, the governing parties simply fight over everything, and when they do it far too publicly, in my opinion, and that of course doesn't go down well with the voters, right? And whether the German aid benefits Scholz or not is a difficult question. We definitely still have a majority in Germany for favoring Ukraine aid. However, at least in my opinion, the way he communicates the aid, how long we are every time talking about all these weapon systems and all the aid, all the debates we're having, like everything is hurting him personally, at least in my opinion. So, and even we are doing really, really good compared to other countries.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, the next question would be, how's that affecting Poland? How's that affecting Hungary? How's that affecting all these other nations, the Baltic nations, and so on? Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so just connect to that before we get to, I don't know, local things around factories that you may or may not know about. In terms of German political parties, you say that there's still broad support. There's still a broad, I guess, coalition of support for Ukraine. Are there many parties that overtly don't support Ukraine? Like, do the AfD, which is the right-wing populist party in Germany, do they overtly, explicitly not support Ukraine? And are they pro-Russian? Are there any other parties that do as well? And are they growing?
Yeah, so I would assume and think that all the left wing and all the right wing parties are against Ukraine aid. At least all the major ones.
You mean extreme left and right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like everything left, everything right is like against Ukraine, and everything in the middle is in favor of Ukraine. I would say you can put it that way. So the left wing, for example, Bündnis Wagenknecht, which is getting very, very popular right now. They are calling for immediately shutdown of all Ukraine aid and for immediate ceasefire in Ukraine, and like it's NATO's fault and all this bullshit. Sorry, am I allowed to say that word?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
Okay. And and the right wings are not different either. They basically have the same opportunity, the same way of thinking when it comes down to Ukraine. You can basically say they're Putin's puppets. And
and that's really interesting because that's how I see it. Is that Putin sows division, or the Kremlin, or the troll farms sow division in countries by sometimes promoting one political extreme, like the far right. I think it's been the far right more often recently than the far left. But in Germany, it's interesting. It's both. It's like if we can divide the country by fomenting discord with both ends of the extreme, and then that confuses people in the middle, and it makes it all chaotic. And that's what's happening. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that I often have the feeling that the people are overestimating the influence of these parties. At least in my opinion, they have big influence. Yes, they have a lot of voters, but I think that they will never be able, at least not in the short term, when nothing too serious happens, they will never be able to form a government majority on their own, right? And nobody wants to work with them. So that will be the reason for their failure. And if the next voting, there's a new government coming, which is not led by the Ampel coalition, like the SPD, the Greens, and the FDP. It will be again the CDU, and the CDU is openly pro-Ukraine. So I don't think that we will have to start worrying or so. Still, it's worrying that they have so much voters in Germany, but I don't think they will ever take over the government.
And ever was it so, Viggo Holmsen, who says they shout the loudest. This is a problem with, you can talk about this with MAGA Republicans in US, and you can be forgiven for thinking that the GOP, the Republican Party, think X or think Y because people like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz or whoever it might be is shouting about that. But actually, they don't necessarily represent the whole there. And those who shout the loudest are often much more in a minority than people may give them credit for being. So that's a really good point. Now, with regard to those, the factories, the investment in local economies, with say Rheinmetall and these other entities building or upscaling or whatever, is that being noted? Is that being noticed? Is that causing people to be thankful that there is investment in local economies at all, or is it just meh?
I personally can't speak for the people who are, for example, living right next to these factories. But what I've seen in documentaries and like with interviews with, for example, Pappberger, the CEO of Rheinmetall, and also other CEOs when they got interviewed, I think that everyone noticed that there is a change of the perspective, like how the people are viewing these companies. Before it was like arms, weapons, Germany, Second World War, and I think from all the interviews I saw, things are changing. People are accepting these companies, know that they are needed, know that they are important, and the people are actually knowing that Germany has to play a major role. That these investments are actually needed to defend not only Ukraine but also us ourselves.
Yeah, that is, and this is something that's so often forgotten. I mean, I talk about this all the time, so my viewers will know this 100%. I would assume, but there is no such thing as a free lunch, and all help to Ukraine from nations, apart from maybe with humanitarian, refugee, charity work. But in terms of governmental provision of aid to Ukraine, this is not a charity. Like, this is not a free lunch. There is no such thing as international diplomatic free lunches. Everything that goes from a state level to Ukraine will be part of a strategic plan that is in the best interest of the nations giving that. Now, this also aligns with morality. So that's a good thing, is that this self-interest of nations helping Ukraine is also backed up by being the right moral thing to do. So it's a double whammy. It's a bonus. But actually, when, for example, Germany is building up factories to make more 155mm shells, there is the idea that this is going to provide Ukraine with the ability to defend itself, but it's also going to provide Germany with the industrial ability to help defend itself. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not only about Ukraine, although a majority of the deliveries should take place to Ukraine, because Ukraine, I don't know why some politicians can't see that, but Ukraine is defending us. Like every day, Russia starts to waste its own or is wasting its own soldiers, its equipment and stuff in Ukraine, right? Every day that happens is like a day which they don't attack us, and the day they actually weaken themselves, right?
Yep.
And I really don't know why we and also other countries, it's not only about Germany, but Germany is included in this, why we don't give Ukraine everything we have or we could spare. I know we are saying we have done this already, but no, that's not true. We could do more. No, we can always do more. And as more as we are giving to Ukraine, not only from our own army stocks, but also from the industry, as more money we are investing in this right now, as less money we are investing in the future. I mean, think about the fact, let's just think about Ukraine losing this war, right? Millions and millions more of refugees alone are going to Europe, to Germany, and other things. We are right now, with over 1 million refugees, are spending 6 billion euros in basic services for the refugees. 6 billion. Can you imagine like staying 2 or 3 million more Ukrainians in Germany alone, like what we are spending over the next decade?
Yeah, and these are when countries like, well, when Germany has been criticized in the past for not doing enough of this and not doing enough of that, people have not often realized what they definitely are doing in terms of that humanitarian support, that refugee support for Ukraine, and that is often not not evaluated in what countries are doing. And I think Germany is doing a tremendous job there. So absolutely. There are sort of two areas left to talk about, really. One is, well, we'll leave the tourists to the end because, hey, we know you love talking about tourists, I'm sure, because that's the German topic. But I wanted to know about funding for the Bundeswehr, funding for military aid, and NATO. So there's all this confusion about how much different countries spend, including Germany, on helping Ukraine, and whether that is equated in defense spending. Because to me, it seems rather bizarre that countries are spending money on defense stuff and sending that straight to Ukraine, why that wouldn't be included in defense spending as a percentage of GDP to reach that 2%. So is Germany spending enough? How much are they going to be spending? And is aid to Ukraine built into that budget?
Yeah, so the last question, yes, it is built into that. And I think that a lot of countries are doing this. At least for Denmark, I know that I've seen a statement by I believe it was the Danish Ministry of Defense or so, saying that they are including the Ukraine aid in their NATO spend budget.
Yeah, and so they should. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of countries are doing this. Germany, that's a difficult
I
topic.
guess the problem is for Germany is you've got a fairly big GDP, so more than other countries. It's why it's all relative, I guess, but it's a big ask for you to. But then the US has a massive GDP, so yeah, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can't compare the US like with all their involvements and how they are involved in the world, in the
Yeah,
world security, where they're.
I agree.
So I think that they should be left out. But from others, I mean, other countries are doing this, especially the Eastern European countries are doing an outstanding job in their NATO spendings, just based on the fact that they share a border with Russia, right? They're sharing
Again, it's
an
self-interest.
immediate danger. Yes, exactly. And Germany doesn't have that. Doesn't mean that Germany shouldn't invest more in our aid or in our defense spending, right? And yeah, this year we are coming to these 2%, but that includes the special fund, that includes the Ukraine aid. And when we are honest, like there were few tricks used to get to this 2%.
David Cameron back in 20 whenever he moved our pensions, our military pensions or something. He did a funky thing with taking basically some welfare spending and putting that in and saying, hey, we've made 2% now. So yeah.
Yeah, it's the same for Germany. We are actually missing, I believe the number was like 10 billion euros in actual spending to reach that 2%. You just mentioned pensions. I mean, we are doing the same thing with the former soldiers, for example, with the GDR, the N4R. We are also including the child benefits for Bundeswehr employees.
Hello?
Yeah.
You just got out. You're also doing it with what? Sorry?
With the child benefits. Sorry, did I lag out or?
Yeah, you just suddenly left me.
Okay.
Interesting. So, but then It's a whole grey area, isn't it? You could say, "Oh, that's cynical," but I wonder whether America do that. How we do it, we all need to be on the same page of the way that we do it. But I guess if your military, spending on your military includes spending on your military families and the welfare for those families. So to me, I think that's all part of it. But whether that means that you shove up the 2% to a higher percentage, I don't know. It's all kind of arbitrary. They're just numbers plucked out of the sky. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right with that. I mean, this includes, yeah, but how is the spending on pensions for the former soldiers of the N4R strengthening Germany's army, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what we always have to keep in mind, right? That these 2% target is there to actually line a foundation to strengthen our army. Yeah,
Yeah.
how is that strengthening our army? Yeah, it is not strengthening our army. We're missing out on money. At least 10 billion euros are missing to actually reach that 2% NATO target. And I'm at least glad that Pistorius said during the Munich Security Conference that these 2% are first only a base level, right? It's just a start.
Yeah.
It actually has to go up. And
especially in times of war, right?
Absolutely. And he also said that he knows that this might be not enough. And I think what he meant by that is it's absolutely not enough. The big problem is, just like you said, Germany has a very, very big economy, right? For many other countries, it's just, okay, we're investing 200 million euros more, and then we have like 0.3% more, and everything is fine. For Germany, like even 0.5% means like 10, 20, 30 billion euros, right? And am I lagging out? Or
Okay, occasionally, but it's fine. Don't worry.
oh, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, and I think that's a big problem.
Yeah. So are Germany going to reach it this year?
This year, yeah, including the tricks and the special fund, we are reaching, I believe it was like 2.01% or something like this. So.
Cool beans. Yeah. Right. So let's get on to Taurus then, my good friend. So we have various things have been mentioned. Deputies of various factions in the Bundestag want to vote this week on the issue of supplying Ukraine with long-range weapons. What does that mean? The reason was apparently Navalny's death. Then Germany plans to send long-range missile systems. Taurus missiles were not mentioned explicitly. Germany's coalition parties are preparing an arms proposal for Ukraine that does not include Taurus cruise missiles, German media reported on the 20th. So can you give us a little idea of what's going on there and whether this is a way of talking about Taurus without mentioning them by name, or whether they're talking about other long-range capabilities?
Yeah, so first, that vote happens tomorrow.
Right.
And it's not particular, although of course the long range stuff is particularly interesting to most of the people. I can see that, but it's not the vote on long range missiles. You may remember, or everyone else here may remember, that there in January there was a motion made by the opposition parties, CDU, CSU, to initiate a Taurus delivery, which was rejected. And on the same day, the governing parties announced that they themselves were working on a motion calling for greater support for Ukraine, to put it briefly.
So that was politicking, where the opposition parties said, we want to provide Taurus to Ukraine, and this is the way I understood it. And the ruling coalition voted that down, even though they actually, many of those people individually wanted Taurus for Ukraine.
Yes.
But this was a way of the opposition parties trying to wrest power, where this is like basic politicking, where you can't allow them to bring a motion and win it and blah blah blah. So it wasn't about the content of what was being talked about, but actually what the opposition were trying to do in terms of power play.
But partly I would absolutely agree. I don't think that the CDU CSU has bad intentions or everything. They certainly really want this, what they are saying.
Yeah.
But sometimes the way they are phrasing these things, I mean, there's always politics going on, you know, it's not, I'm sure that happens in every country. But I think in our country, it's just more public due to the topic or due to the nation of our support, right? And to the motion, this actually, or at least they announced it, that actually should include Taurus, but it doesn't include it in the final version, at least not by name. Before I explain, I would like to point out once again, a lot of people always forgetting this, that this motion, just like the motion before made by the CEO, CSO, has no binding power whatsoever. It, at best, it's putting more pressure on the Chancellery, on Scholz, but that's as far as it goes. There's no binding power, that's okay, we have now a majority, now the Bundeskanzler needs to send these cruise missiles. No, that's absolutely not true. It's basically just a statement made by the parliament, by the Bundestag. Okay, that's our position. Now you know what we want. And to actually do this with the ruling parties, that actually means something, right? But it's still non-binding.
So again, it's just a case of waiting for Olaf. I mean, is it just Olaf Scholz that is the one? Is it literally a single human being that is not wanting these to go? That's stopping this from happening, or is he? I mean, my opinions are always. I talked about this with Biden and ATACMS and stuff like that. Is that Biden doesn't really know about ATACMS and the relative ranges of ATACMS compared to whatever else and this and that. Like he's a busy man doing all sorts of stuff all day long or whatever. And so my opinions were always that it's probably the Department of Defense in the US that are saying, we're not happy with ATACMS going. And you can put whatever reasoning on that, but strategically, for some reason, we need ATACMS until we get the new PRISM missile in or whatever. So for me, like, is it just Olaf Scholz on his own worrying about escalation, or is it the Bundeswehr saying, actually, we're not too happy with Taurus going because it's got some pretty important tech in that we don't want the Russians getting a hold of. It is also, we think it might be escalator or something from our positioning. What's your thoughts? Speculation, of course.
Yeah, that's right. It's a speculation, right? There are a lot of reasons given, let's put it that way. There were a lot of reasons given by the Chancellery and by SPD politicians and by other politicians, which are not true. But there are some things which nobody can explain, or where people would say, okay, that's maybe the case, but we don't know if it's true, because Scholz isn't going public about it, right? I mean, there's like, for example, that people say, yeah, maybe Biden is against it. And we all know that Scholz does what Biden says, right? He waited for the approval of Abrams until he, until he accepted Leopards, for example, and all these things, right? So it could be that Biden is blocking, but we don't know. It could be that just Scholz is saying, no, I don't want it because it's maybe too escalatory, or I don't want to start a war or whatever, you know. But we don't know it since he's not going very public about it, about his reasons,
isn't it? And there's the idea that the Taurus, more than the Scalp, the Storm Shadow, has the ability, due to its fuse and its detection circuitry and whatever, that's as geeky as I get, is better able to destroy the Kerch Bridge, or at least to puncture through the top of the bridge to then hit the pillars below. So the Taurus is better able to do that. And if they give it to Ukraine, then they could bring down the Kerch Bridge with it, and Germany could be implicit in doing that, and maybe that's a worry for him. But if that's like the main worry, then you give it to them and say, you're not allowed to use this on the Kerch Bridge, and then that solves that problem, right?
Yeah, and there's actually quite funny that you mentioned it. There were actually media reports which were quoting politicians with secret meetings or non-public meetings, let's phrase it that way, where Scholz actually At least that's what they are saying, right? We don't know if it's true or not, but they are saying that Scholz actually said that he wanted to use the Crimean Bridge as a negotiating point in case of future peace negotiations in Ukraine. So, and he can't use it when the bridge is destroyed, right?
Right.
So it could be that it could be another reason. We really just don't know. The only thing we know is that from a legal standpoint, only the Chancellor or the Federal Security Council have a final say in the topic. So even if Biden, for example, would say, no, don't do it, he could still say, I'm doing this. Even if it's on politicians, and I'm like the SPD, for example, his own party, and I think there is a very, very strong no vote on this. He could still say we're doing this. It basically just depends on them. And to the SPD, there was like an experimental paper with this motion, right? I mean, it's not like there's a paper and then it's done. Like every party is doing their own papers and then they are working together. Like what are we scratching out? What are we want to add? What do we want to change in the text, right? And in the experimental paper of the SPD, they actually said we do not adapt
Is
this
that
demand.
this?
Yes, that's the final version. And in the experimental paper, so in the first version, the SPD even wrote, we do not adapt this demand, so Taurus, in our motion. And I think that says a lot about the views of some of the important SPD members, right? And now the motion only states the delivery of additional far-reaching weapon systems and ammunition, which is required to enable Ukraine to attack strategically relevant targets far in the rear area of the Russian aggression, which is good. But I mean, you could basically say that's the missiles for Mars 2, for example, or the Volcano ammunition for our Panzerhaubitze, which we have delivered, which is like the far-reaching ammunition anyone has delivered to Ukraine, right? So they, in my opinion, are giving too much room to the SPD for interpretation, right? Yeah, and that what was actually mentioned yesterday in the German news, that all the opposition parties are saying, yeah, that's basically just saying, or we are talking about Taurus, we just didn't use that word, right, due to the SPD, but it's Taurus, and some SPD politicians and the chancellery were talking to the media and saying, yeah, but that's about Mars 2. So it's exactly what I feared, and yeah, it's.
So what do you think I mean, I know it's just you as an individual, and again, anecdotal or whatever, but what percentage chance do you think there is of Taurus ever getting to Ukraine?
On a realistic, I mean, I think it purely depends on what is happening in Ukraine, right? But I would think right now, less than 10%, if at all.
Right.
It's yeah. I mean, we were talking about this for how long now? 8 months, 9 months, or something like this.
That's
Yeah,
true. Hasn't happened yet.
and
Yeah.
we're not coming forward. I mean, and people are always forgetting that even if Scholz today now says, "Hey, Taurus is going to Ukraine," it will at least take, let's say, half a year until Taurus would be operational, right? And when we are taking into account that the months is already the years already like 2 months pass. Wait another 3 or 4 months, and then Taurus won't be in Ukraine until 2025. So
I'm just going to give thanks to a few kind contributors to the channel, and then one last thing I'm going to mention. Thanks to Johnny Christensen, always a great supporter from Denmark. Thanks, matey. And Lawrence22 is a fantastic supporter of the channel with a super sticker there. Really appreciate you, as well as Tahir from Norway. Thank you. It's this Scandinavian love that keeps coming through. Really appreciate that. And do you know what? Tim Vermorgan says, afternoon cup of tea, listen to Jonathan and GAU. I know worse things to do on a Wednesday. I've finished my cup of tea. So, you know it's gone well when that's happened. AJ Simo gifted some membership. So thanks so much for that. Mitch Mazarol really appreciate you. Good to hear from you again, mate. Hola, peeps. Got here late, so starting at the start. Thanks for the great content, JP. Well, thanks for your continued support, my friend. Julian Rossiter, does GAU think if long... here's a question, so you might be a little bit longer. Does GAU think if longer range ATACMs are ever given, then Germany will give Taurus? And that's relevant to what you're just saying, actually. It's a great question, Julian.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the question. So if anyone has questions for me, you can feel free to just ask them. I take the time. Regarding this question, it purely depends, because Scholz and other politicians are always pointing out how the Taurus is different to the Storm Shadow and the Scalp G, that nobody has delivered a comparable system to Ukraine. So if they are now providing ATACMS, and what are we talking about? 300 miles or 190 miles?
I think 300 kilometers, that one.
300 kilometers. Yeah, so I don't think that when they're delivering the longer range version, I mean, it's still not long range. Even Taurus is not long range, and we have an official range of 500 kilometers, unofficial up to 700 kilometers, and even that is not a long range missile. I don't think that will happen. The US has to give a comparable system in terms of range. At least that's the argument always used by the major politicians, by the Minister of Defense, by Chancellor Scholz, for example. And then we could think about, at least this argument can't be used anymore. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Good stuff. Oh, thanks for the answer. Thanks for the question. And thanks to Mr. Lion Dust. The German population used to be quite cautious with military aid compared to humanitarian aid due to World War II. Do you see a change here since the war? And you've kind of hinted that already in one of your answers already. But yeah, go for that.
Yeah, I think your answer you just pointed out was regarding the defense industry, right?
Yes.
Yeah. To answer this question, do you see a change here since the war? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you always have to think about where we started, and we still delivered military aid to certain regions, I would say, but not very much, and at least not to that extent. And the politicians, major politicians, are always mentioning, when you think about, and I think that's a great assessment of the situation, when you think about 2 years ago, somebody would say that Germany would deliver military aid into a war zone worth many, many billions of euros each year. Nobody thought this would be true. And I think that also goes for Germany. I mean, we did great, and a lot of stuff changed for the civilian population and also for the politics. Yeah, absolutely.
I love this term, Vergangenheitsbewältigung.
You did good.
Yeah, it's all right. Which is the coming to terms with Nazi history that the German population has had to do, almost forced to do to some degree. And the big difference between Germany and Russia is that Russia never went through this with their Soviet equivalents, right? So the horrors that were committed by Stalin, the horrors that were, the Holodomor, famine and genocide, these things, Russia has never had to come to terms with them. And so they've never really learned about them in their own history. They're still going through a revisionist history that they are taught. Their children don't learn about the reality of their own horrors that they committed throughout the last 100 years. But Germany has done that and has come through that into a much better understanding of who they are. This is me, how I see it. Is that fair? A fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are overestimating this Vergangenheitsbewältigung, like you pointed out, because when it comes to me, I say something personal for me, right? I'm 25 years old, right? I'm a more or less grown-up man. And even my grandparents weren't born when the war ended, right? They were born after the war. And so I think that a lot of older people in Germany has still these Vergangenheitsbewältigungs thinking, to deal with the guilt of your past. But I think that a lot of younger people don't have that. And I,
Right.
for myself,
Interesting.
don't really have that. I think we bear responsibility, and we have to make sure that this stuff never happens in the future. And I don't say that we didn't do bad stuff. Germany did horrible things during the World War. Things you can't even mention, absolutely. But I think these typical thinking, oh, it's our guilt and we have to deal with this and this is also our fault. I think that doesn't apply to many young people anymore, because they're saying, hey, I mean, that's 80 years ago. Like, what do you like? Why is it my fault? You know, when even my grandparents weren't born during war times.
Absolutely.
Like, when is enough time passed that we actually say we don't? I mean, we still have a responsibility. Absolutely, I absolutely agree with that. But when is enough time passed that it's not our? I mean, it's still our fault. I hope you get what I mean,
Yeah,
right?
for sure. I mean, it's a difficult thing, but yeah, there is the idea of collective responsibility is difficult enough concept anyway. But then you take that across time, and then with every passing year, there's a for example, I don't feel personally bad about like the history of the British Empire involved in slavery, but I understand that we have a responsibility to accurately portray what exactly happened, to not look at history with rose-tinted glasses, and to be able to repair the damage that was done in terms of education, in terms of cultural integration, in terms of foreign diplomacy or whatever. And there's a slight difference there, and I guess that's kind of what you're talking about, which is I don't feel personally responsible for it. My parents, my grandparents had nothing to do with the slavery in the example I'm giving, but I understand the place that the UK, the role that we played in that trade and in slavery. So, is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's say another 80 years are passing, right? And like, think about the fact how many countries in the world have started wars over the last 150, 180 years, right? With a different country. And um, it's hard to explain. I can just always say that we have a responsibility to make sure that this never happens again, that we educate the people, that we actually accept what we have done in the past. But the typical term of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, that I personally actually feel guilty for what my grandparents have done, that's, at least for me and for a lot of other young people, not the case anymore.
Yeah, as Fifi Barbara here says, there is a difference between being responsible and being guilty, and I think that I think you've expressed that really well. So just the last thing I wanted to say, Richard Bennett, thank you very much. By the way, always such a great supporter of the channel. Thank you for gifting those memberships. Now, John Cromwell says something here which I think is worth dwelling on with regard to. Well, it'll be something I want to ask about Germany, but John Cromwell rightly says Biden has an amazing economy going on right now for America. He's just rated a top 10 president by a group of historians. Actually, he's a 14th. He came in 14th. But Trump came in last, and that's a good 150 historians and experts. So it tells you something. But this is really interesting, because this is completely right. Like, the American economy at the moment is outpacing basically the G7, every meaningful economy in the world. Americans are smashing virtually every metric. And what this means, this is good news. What we want this anyway, because a prosperous world is hopefully a world where we can look after everyone better if we get things right politically. But actually, this is really good news for Ukraine, because if the US was really struggling economically, then you would have far more people in the US going, well, I don't want our tax dollars going towards aiding Ukraine because we're all screwed. So the longer and the better the US does economically, the more aid is, well, the easier it is to get aid to Ukraine. So I think that's super important. Now, relevant to you as a German and with your knowledge, how's the German economy doing, and does that play at all in the discussion about aid to Ukraine from Germany?
How's the German economy going? I
I
mean,
threw that one at you.
no, I mean, we talked about 200 billion in economic damage, right?
Yeah.
And I think that a large part of this was due to the high energy prices. We had to
Right.
go away from Russian gas, from Russian oil, everything, and gladly, for example, Norway and the Netherlands are helped out very, very strongly. So I'm very, very grateful to every Norwegian, to everyone from the Netherlands, that they actually helped out us a lot. And I think that actually influenced the German economy a lot, which is just normal, right? And due to the high prices, I mean, Germany is an export nation, right? High prices for production means higher prices for export, means less export, means more influence in Germany's economy in total, right? So I think we're doing okay still. I mean, when I remember right, please correct me, someone, when I say something wrong. But I think we just we stepped over Japan in terms of third strongest economic.
Oh, really? That's good. That's very
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
I think I saw that despite the problems we had in Germany, we're actually now the third strongest economic country in the world, not the fourth anymore. But just as I said, please correct me as someone if that's not true. But I think I saw that. So I think we're still doing fine, but there are a lot of problems.
Yeah, I mean, UK, we've slipped, I believe, although there's, as you mentioned, that it depends how you slice and dice the statistics. I think we slipped from fifth to sixth now since coming out of the EU, and I think they're now accepting that that's affected us negatively, economically speaking. So, without wanting to open up the whole Brexit debate, I don't think we're ever going to win the Brexit debate on economics. That's for sure. Anyway, well, I'll park that one before I get lots of rabid commenters. Look, thank you so much for your time today, mate. I really appreciate that. It's some really good chat going on in the live chat. So it's always really rewarding to see deep, thoughtful comments in the live chat on a video, because it means that we are inspiring people to get to grips with some of the ideas we're talking about. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that you haven't said that you think needs to be added?
Maybe one thing regarding the motion tomorrow.
Yeah.
I want again to point out that the motion has no binding power, so the people shouldn't expect too much from it. Still, it's a very, very good motion. That's what I haven't said yet. Still, it's a very good motion. I mean, the motion is, for example, calling on the further delivery of spare parts, on the increase of our own defense and ammunition production capacities, of the delivery on the delivery of armored combat systems, and much more, assisting Ukraine in the reconstruction, and so on and so on and so on. So it's a very, very good motion. Yeah, maybe it has some influence in the future. Maybe it has some impact. Maybe not. We don't know. It's basically a non-binding. We just know that the parliament expresses its feelings, how they are thinking, and that the governing parties are doing this is actually very good. But on the same time, there are still political power going on, right? The opposition party, the CDU, for example, already said beforehand, before the vote, that they are voting with no. Still, they're
So hang on. So the CDU proposed this previously and said, "Let's do this," and they voted yes. And the government said, "We're not going to vote that because you propose it, so we're going to vote no." And so then the government said, "But we're going to propose it later." And then so they propose it and they say yes, and the CDU say no. Is that how it's gone?
Yeah, so the CDU, and I just want to make that very clear, the Norbert Röttgen, which is a very vocal CDU politician, he said that his party just votes with yes when Taurus is mentioned by name.
Right.
Otherwise, they're going to vote no. And there's a lot of
interesting.
there's a lot of more stuff going on, because the Marie-Agnes Strack-Zimmermann, for example, which is part of the FDP and is very, very vocal about the Taurus, she actually said that due to the fact that Taurus isn't mentioned by name, she's part of the government parties, right? And due to the lack of the naming of Taurus, she actually will vote yes for both motions. So the CDU will also bring on a motion on tomorrow, where Taurus is mentioned, and she actually said that this time, last time she said no, this time she will vote with yes. And
So we could get a situation where, well, it depends on the CDU really, but we could get a situation where there is a strong message to Scholz that people want long-range provision from Germany to Ukraine, and then it's up to him, right? The buck would only stop with him. Would that be fair?
yeah, I mean the CDU motion still won't get passed. I mean the even big Ukraine supporters which want Taurus to Ukraine said that they're voting with no, and that the motion doesn't get a majority just because they have their own motion, and that's enough, basically. I think it's still a message to Scholz, yes, because something like this doesn't happen as far. And I mean, this motion still says how valuable the Storm Shadow and the Sky G is. That it's actually necessary that Germany provides weapon which to strike on targets behind the Russian lines. So I think that's a novum. That's not something which you see very, very often, and especially not on an official level, right? With the whole parliament voting on it. So it's a very, very important message. It's just having that binding power, that it actually means, okay, now the chancellor has to do something. It doesn't mean that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is all in here, all these points, I presume, about long range capabilities. And I mean, just hope they say the right things. And then I hope some action follows on from that at some point. That would be obviously brilliant. Nice one, mate. Well, thanks for answering those questions that might have been thrown at you without any preparation. Appreciate that. And I appreciate very much the live stream and the people who watch this. So thanks, guys. Really appreciate everyone. And thank you so much to GAU. Please go and check out his presence on Twitter and check out his German Aid to Ukraine, or at Dea Idua, and check out deaidua.org/EN and /news. And also Tochny you can find by going online and just putting in Tochny, and you can find them on both as a website but also on YouTube and on Twitter as well. So please go and check out these guys. Thanks, mate. Really appreciate that. And hopefully we can speak again soon.
Anytime you want. Was nice to be here.
Nice one, dude. Thanks for Johnny Christensen again. Have to walk my dog. Nice stream. Goodbye. And goodbye to you, my friend. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Speak to you soon. Toodle pips.